In my previous video, I discussed insect and, more broadly, arthropod intelligence, and how, although they have some remarkable behavioral and cognitive abilities, these abilities are not on par, or at least not in the same category, as the intelligence found within vertebrates. The main contention was the difference between general and special intelligence. So first, let me define what that is. Even if an insect thinks in a way more complex than a computer program, specialized intelligence, or at least behavior created by it, can be defined as rote, pre-programmed, and pulling from a database of established behaviors, regardless of flexibility of which behavior is performed. Specialist intelligence can be very complex, but it has hardwired behaviors, and is not generative in the way how, say, crows can use tools, or how rats can play with their owners. Now, general intelligence, by contrast, is defined as when the neurons in a brain are highly interconnected, and so support things such as working memory, sense of self, or complex emotion. All of those traits have to do with the crosstalk between neurons. That is, being able to hold multiple concepts in the brain at once, and compare them and contrast them. Arthropods are unable to do this to any complicated degree, so in this video I'll be showing why that is. Before I do, however, let me first give an example. This specifically was the most common contradiction put forth in the comment section of the last video, and it was basically about how certain studies have claimed to show how bees have demonstrated play-like behavior. The bees appeared to push small wooden balls around, even though there was no immediate or learned reward. Now, this is interesting as a practice behavior, as specialist intelligence does not negate practice behavior, so long as the behavior is found within the animal's existing pre-programmed repertoire of behaviors. That is, they have something analogous to it in nature. Many bees practice pushing and pulling flowers in the wild, and because they're generalist pollinators, they have to deal with a lot of different kinds of flowers, and so have to learn what those flowers are and how to deal with them. But in a lab study, this can be analogous to the ropes or balls used that the bees are pushing and pulling on. Now, this mimics general intelligence, but it's actually quite specialized, and these practice behaviors are used to reinforce instinctual behavior, but not to generate new behaviors, as seen in general intelligence. They can absolutely remember places, events, objects, even other individuals, but this does not change the hardwired behaviors that they have to respond with. The behaviors themselves don't change, they're just reinforced or selected through a pragmatic but not generative process. The behaviors displayed can mimic general intelligence in ways that look like play or working out a situation, but they are extremely specialized in actuality because they're designed for that insect's or arachnid's specific life strategy, which is why, although honeybees like to push and pull on objects, jumping spiders have no analogous survival strategy, and so even though they possess the intelligence to, they don't push and pull on objects for play or any other reason, even to get a reward. Now, it's not just evidence through study. There are actual physiological and morphological constraints preventing arthropods from having higher brain function. So let's explore what those are. Now, arthropods differ from vertebrates in this specific way. They have an exoskeleton, whereas vertebrates, which include us, have an internal or endoskeleton. Now, some arachnids have certain hard parts on their insides called endosternites. However, that doesn't change the fact that all arthropods have an exoskeleton which covers their whole body, and vertebrates don't. And this is important to remember. The second thing is that relying on an exoskeleton inherently limits size due to weight limitations. That's because the larger the animal gets, the larger its skeleton has to get. And since it's outside the musculature of the animal, it's always designed to be larger and heavier than the muscles supporting them. So their size is inherently limited in this way, which is why the coconut crab and the giant spider crab, although able to reach incredible sizes, are extremely slow and limited in both size and range, as there's just not that many niches for giant lethargic arthropods, and giant arthropods can only be lethargic. Now, because of how exoskeletons interact with the muscles of an organism, they also directly interact with the metabolism, that is, oxygen requirements. And oxygen is the key thing here, because oxygen both limits mental capacity and size if you can't get enough of it. Which is why arthropods back in the Carboniferous, when there was a lot more oxygen on the planet, were able to grow so much larger. And perhaps they were more intelligent too. But let's get back on topic. In order for an animal to have higher brain function, that is, the traits associated with general intelligence, an animal has to have consistent, strong, and well-supplied oxygen, either through blood or the air. This is because high-performance neurons are very greedy metabolically, and also quite delicate. Neurons have to be made in a very precise way, because they use electricity to send messages back and forth, which limits how complex they can actually get in order for them to efficiently send info back and forth. They need a high metabolism specifically because it takes a lot of oxygen to produce the electrical signals. If you add on layers of complexity, like holding multiple ideas, thus having different networks of neurons firing at the same time, and then having another set of neurons dedicated to comparing and contrasting those ideas, it adds on layers of complexity and adds on oxygen requirements. This has less to do with long-term memory and more to do with a working memory, that is, holding ideas in your mind actively and then working them out through various details and the like, which is the hallmark of general intelligence. Since arthropods can't actually send that much oxygen to their brain, they have to cut costs somewhere, and so a lot of their neural network activity is mechanized, that is, hardwired. They quite literally cannot generate novel behaviors because they don't have enough mental fuel to do so. Every job becomes specialized and not integrated because they do not have enough metabolic efficiency. Now, why can vertebrates manage this, but arthropods not so much? Well, it goes back to how the skeletons of these animals deal with their muscles, because muscles need something to attach to so they can pull and push off to facilitate movement. The endoskeleton of vertebrates supports a closed circulatory and respiratory system, meaning they possess a series of veins and pumps that pump throughout the body with strength through our vertebrate hearts. This allows for a consistent and oxygen-rich supply of blood to the brain and the rest of the body. Something to note, the human brain is only 2% of our body weight, but at rest it steals about 20% of our oxygen, although in less intelligent vertebrates it's more about 10%. In insects, they actually can't mechanically prioritize their brain over the other organs without severe limitations of the size of those organs, because with them it's a matter of filling a closed space passively with air. Let me explain. Arthropods can't support higher brain function, and it's for two reasons, working in tandem. The first is that their exoskeleton prevents them from doing two things. One, being able to suck in air, or even water. The second is that it prevents them from having a closed circulatory system, that is, blood pumping with any degree of intensity within their body. And the next reason is actually preventing this first reason. In order to suck in air, a creature has to create negative pressure within some sort of diaphragm, but the exoskeleton itself is not flexible and cannot support muscles that do so in that way. Even if you had a separate lung-like organ within the arthropod, then it would need to pair with a closed circulatory system to be practically useful. But those cannot and do not develop in arthropods because exerting pressure inside an exoskeleton is incredibly dangerous. Think of your body. When you pump blood into muscles, what happens? They flex. There is an inherent flexibility which allows them to expand and shrink comfortably. But in an arthropod, if you were to be pumping blood around like that, it would explode the animal if it tried to match the pressure anywhere near that of a vertebrate. And because that can't happen, arthropods never went down the route of sucking in air or water and instead take in air passively through little holes around their body, called spiracles, which go into trachea, which are branching tree-like organs. This works great across small distances because oxygen can be absorbed directly into the muscles from the surrounding air, which is why it can support flight easily, as the wings are directly exposed. In fact, hummingbirds and bats have to have enormous lungs to support the oxygen demands of their circulatory system flight, which is why insects are generally superior flyers metabolically. Now, from this same principle, perhaps if the insect brain was exposed to the elements directly, it could be more intelligent by meeting constant oxygen requirements. But there has yet to be such a case for a myriad of morphological reasons. Now, hold the phone. What about crustaceans and arachnids? Because their circulatory and respiratory system are different. They still don't suck in air, but they do absorb it into cavities, sort of analogous to lungs, which they then pump into the rest of their body using a basic heart mechanism. This blood is actually oxygenated, but they seem to have run into the same problem. The exoskeleton is finicky and won't allow the blood to pump past a certain threshold, lest the animal explode from pressure, like a tank being filled past capacity. I explained in my previous video that spiders actually rely on pumping blood or hemolymph throughout their body to act as hydraulics that extend their leg muscles to help them build webs with precision and accuracy. Jumping spiders actually further elaborated on this and are in fact descended from web builders. These guys take leg hydraulics to the next level to extend their legs outward with great power, but their size is limited because of this, as if they were bigger their legs would actually explode. They can still get fairly big, however, although the larger ones actually have weaker jumps for this reason. The spider's ability to pump hemolymph around its body with intensity and consistency, even though they still can't actively suck in air, breathing passively like insects, although when they bob their abdomen up and down, it's analogous to a sort of breathing as it helps to push air into their book lungs, which allows for more consistent oxygen access to their brains. This still isn't perfect, however, but to me it appears to be the best solution any arthropod has come up with in the way of supporting complex mental activity. However, while this still helps for their complex mental processes, that is, choosing optimal routes for prey capture, or showing memory consolidation that could be seen as a primitive form of dreaming, they still do not qualify for general intelligence. because they cannot learn novel behaviors. A dog can learn to stand on its hind legs to get a treat, which is something abstract that it can do because its brain can learn to do such things that have no practical application in the wild. But arthropods cannot afford the mental cost of such abstraction, and so are limited fundamentally. Many crustaceans adopt a similar hemolymph pumping system around their body through a very weak heart, but they're limited by the same factor of not being able to actively extract water or oxygen from the air, that is, breathe in through a diaphragm. Another factor limiting crustacean intelligence but not size is the fact that water contains a lot less oxygen than air. That sounds redundant, but it actually limits the intelligence of most marine creatures. And the fact that dolphins and whales are way more intelligent than anything else in the ocean is precisely because they breathe using oxygen from the air and not oxygen from water through gills or analogous breathing mechanisms. On screen now are the general traits that general intelligence allows for, so there can be no confusion as to my definition. So here they are now. That being said, thanks for your patience and thanks for watching this episode of Privileged Bug Facts. Stay tuned for more deep dive analyses just like this. Thanks.